We found out our father had passed away actually on a car radio, and we were living with him. So it's one of those things where we've known just growing up in our family that there's not as much of the same sense of certain things are private.
Kristin Nelson lived her life in the public eye, but few people know the real story behind her painful decline. How did someone married to one of the biggest stars in the country end up losing control of her own world? And how did her 4 kids navigate the chaos left in the aftermath? The Harmon name. Long before Kristin became part of a famous rock family, she belonged to one of the most celebrated big-name households in Southern California. You see, her dad was Tom Harmon, a legendary college football player who won the Heisman Trophy in 1940 while playing for the University of Michigan. Everyone knew him as Old 98, and he rushed for over 2,134 yards back in his glory days. But he was not just a sports star. During World War II, he served as a military pilot and survived being shot down 2 separate times. The first time happened over South America, where he spent 11 days walking out of a thick jungle. The second time happened over China when enemy fire took down his plane. After returning home from the war as a hero, he moved straight into radio and television and quickly became one of the most popular sports broadcasters in all of California. Kristin's mother, Elise Knox, was a prominent movie star who appeared in dozens of films during the 40s before stepping back to focus on raising her family. Together, her parents were the ideal Hollywood couple, and they gave their 3 children a life filled with opportunity. Kristin was the oldest child, and she grew up alongside her younger sister Kelly, who later became famous as the face of Tic Tac candy commercials, and her younger brother Mark Harmon, who eventually spent 18 seasons starring in the hit television show NCIS. As a young girl, Kristin attended Marymount High School, an exclusive all-girls Catholic school in Bel Air. That was where she spent her school days hanging out with celebrity kids, including her close friend Mia Farrow. On the surface, Kristin seemed destined for an easy life in the California sunshine. But things started to take a whole new turn when she was just 12 years old. That was the moment she sat in a television studio audience and caught her very first sight of the biggest teen idol in the country, Ricky Nelson. At the time, she was simply one more screaming fan in the crowd, and had no idea that this handsome young singer would soon pull her into a crazy world she definitely was not prepared to handle. The teen idol underneath the image. Like Kristin, Ricky Nelson also came from a well-known family. His dad, Ozzie Nelson, worked as a big band leader and married his main singer, Harriet Hilliard. The couple moved out west to California when Ricky was just a toddler, and by 1944, the whole family started working together on a radio show called The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. In 1952, that radio show moved over to television and stayed on the air for 14 whole seasons until 1966. It was one of the longest-running sitcoms in television history that created a unique situation where a real family played fictional versions of themselves every single week, while millions of Americans watched them grow up. The TV version of the Nelson family looked like absolute perfection. Ozzie was the silly dad, Harriet was the sweet mom, David was the responsible older brother, and Ricky was the funny, handsome little brother everyone loved. But Ozzie ran everything with tight control by managing the family business down to the smallest detail. In 1957, when Ricky was 16 years old, he wanted to impress a girl he was dating by bragging that he made music records. So, he set up a real recording session, sang a song on an episode of the family TV show, and the fan reaction went wild overnight. His first single went straight to number 4 on the charts, and his second song hit number 1. Before he was even 17, Ricky was selling records almost as fast as Elvis Presley, while still playing the clean-cut boy next door on television every week. The trouble was that Ricky lived two completely different lives. He was a genuinely talented musician who loved real rockabilly music, but his dad kept firm control over his career and treated him like a polished product to make money for the family brand. By the time he reconnected with Kristin around Christmas 1961, when she was 16 and he was 21, he was used to hiding his true self. They dated for a year, got engaged, and then Kristin suddenly found out she was pregnant. A wedding at 17. When 17-year-old Kristin Harmon walked down the aisle to marry 22-year-old Ricky Nelson on April 20th, 1963, the public thought they were watching a Hollywood dream come true. After all, she was the daughter of a famous football hero, and he was the biggest teen heartthrob in America. But the rush to the altar at St. Martin of Tours Catholic Church in Los Angeles was actually driven by Kristin's pregnancy. Also, Ricky was not Catholic, so before they could say their vows, he had to take religious classes and sign a paper promising to raise their kids in her faith. Years down the road, Ricky was totally honest about why they married so fast, flat out calling it a shotgun wedding. Once the wedding wrapped up, Kristin was immediately pulled into the giant machine of the Nelson family empire. Instead of getting time to adjust to being a young wife, she was put straight onto the cast of The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. She made her TV debut in an episode called Rick's Wedding Ring, which meant a teenage girl was now acting out her own real-life marriage on television every single week for millions of strangers. That arrangement made normal life almost impossible because the clean image of the show demanded total perfection. Kristin had to play the happy, dutiful wife on camera, leaving zero room for real-life arguments or simply growing up at her own pace. Before long, the line between her actual home and the TV set disappeared completely. While they kept smiling for the cameras, two very young people were privately struggling to figure out how to raise a family under a national spotlight. That constant tension put a heavy strain on their relationship right from the start, which set the stage for the arrival of their 4 children and the chaotic home life that was about to follow. 4 children, a marriage under strain. 6 months after that April wedding, on October 25, 1963, Kristin gave birth to their first child, a daughter named Tracy Christine. Born premature and weighing just 4 pounds, Tracy came into a family where public exposure was simply the norm. By the time she was 5 years old, she was already acting alongside Lucille Ball in the movie Yours, Mine, and Ours. 4 years after Tracy, on September 20th, 1967, Kristin gave birth to twin boys, Gunnar Eric and Matthew Gray. Then, after a 7-year gap, their 4th child, Sam Hilliard, arrived on August 29, 1974. While having 4 kids usually brings a family closer together, the Nelson household was falling apart behind closed doors. Ricky spent most of his time on the road, performing concert after concert across the country. That rock and roll lifestyle led to constant rumors of infidelity, which left Kristin back home in Los Angeles to manage 4 children on her own in the middle of all the rumors. The deep isolation of being left behind hit her hard, and she began turning to substances and alcohol to cope with the pressure. Her reliance on these hard substances and alcohol grew worse with every passing year, and it created a volatile environment for the young kids growing up in the house. The children, as one would expect, were smack in the middle of the tension between their parents. At that point, the marriage was no longer a partnership, but a daily battle between 2 people living completely separate lives. By 1975, The couple was barely holding things together, and the emotional distance turned into outright hostility. Ricky stayed away on tour to avoid the chaos at home, while Kristin's dependency made everyday life more unpredictable for the whole family. Just like that, what started as a young romance had slowly turned into an unbearable routine of absence and constant fighting. That painful decline was finally reaching a breaking point, and it set the stage for a messy split that would end up spilling right into the public courtroom. The unraveling. By 1975, the marriage was practically over in every way that mattered. The couple still lived under the same roof, but they were essentially leading two completely different lives. The breaking point finally came in 1977, when Ricky came back from a music tour and discovered that Kristin had moved all his personal belongings out of their house and straight into a rental property. She had taken matters into her own hands to end the physical side of their relationship. In October 1977, Kristin filed for divorce for the very first time and asked for spousal support, full custody of their 4 children, and her share of their property. But like many couples who have children and shared a long history, they tried to patch things up. They temporarily called off the split, but the old problems of addiction and distance quickly resurfaced. In April 1980, they made one last strange attempt to show the world they were fine by purchasing a huge estate on Mulholland Drive that had once belonged to legendary actor Errol Flynn. They paid $750,000 for the property, which was a wild financial risk considering their marriage was already broken and their money was running low. But because they had spent their entire adult lives inside the public eye, buying a glamorous Hollywood mansion felt like a requirement. Sadly, the illusion did not hold for long. Just 6 months later, in October 1980, Kristin filed for divorce a second time, and this time, there was no turning back. What came after that was 2 years of brutal fighting in the California courts that played out across local tabloid pages. Kristin wanted Ricky to quit the music industry and focus on being a full-time husband and father. But Ricky refused to give up touring and insisted it was the only way he knew how to earn a living. In February 1981, a judge gave Kristin temporary custody of the kids, along with $3,600 a month in support. The legal war dragged on until the divorce was finally settled on December 27, 1982. The court fight was a financial nightmare, with lawyers and accountants taking over $1 million in fees. Both of them walked away from the marriage financially drained and emotionally exhausted. Worst of all, the 4 children were caught in the middle. Tracy lived with her dad, the twins moved in with Ricky as soon as they turned 18, and young Sam was bounced around between various family members, completely unsettled as the adults fought over what was left. That lingering bitterness was still hanging over everyone when an unexpected tragedy struck on New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve, 1985. On December 31st, 1985, any lingering hope of resolving the past came to a sudden, tragic end. 45-year-old Ricky Nelson was flying with his band from Alabama to Texas for a big New Year's Eve show. They were traveling in a converted Douglas DC-3 plane that had been experiencing mechanical issues in the days leading up to the trip. Mid-flight, a fire broke out inside the cabin. The pilots tried to make an emergency landing, but the aircraft crashed into trees near the small town of DeKalb, Texas. Everyone in the back of the plane died, including Ricky, his fiancée, Helen Blair, and 5 members of his band. Early rumors claimed substance use was involved, but official safety investigators later confirmed that a faulty cabin heater ignited leaking fuel, which caused the fatal fire. At 40 years old, Kristin got the news that her ex-husband was gone. Sure, they had been divorced for 3 years, but he was still the father of her 4 children and the man she had been connected to since she was 12 years old. His sudden death eliminated any chance for them to ever make peace or build a healthier relationship for their kids. And instead of bringing the family together in grief, the tragedy only deepened the rift. The funeral turned into a deeply uncomfortable and painful day for everyone present. Tensions were running high because Kristin was already worried about how her 4 children would be provided for financially. She approached Ricky's brother, David Nelson, who was managing the estate, to ask about life insurance and asset distributions. David made sure the estate was set up strictly to protect the 4 children, and a judge ultimately rejected Kristin's personal claim to any share of Ricky's money. The pain and frustration boiled over right at the funeral. A fierce argument broke out between Kristin and her eldest daughter, Tracy, which escalated into a physical fight where Kristin shoved Tracy to the ground and hit her with her purse. It was such a heartbreaking scene, especially as it happened in front of family and friends who came to mourn with them. After all was said and done, Ricky's 4 children inherited what was left of their father's estate, while Kristin walked away with nothing from the marriage that had consumed her youth. Losing Ricky shattered the fragile ground beneath her feet, which only made her addiction worse than it ever was. The dragon in the courtroom. By the spring of 1987, Kristin's life was crashing down because of her dependency on prescription medications. Seeing his sister unraveling, her younger brother, Mark Harmon, stepped in. Mark was now a major television star and one of the most recognizable faces in Hollywood, having just starred in the hit movie Summer School. He convinced Kristin to check into the Chemical Dependency Center at Eisenhower Medical Center in Rancho Mirage to finally get clean. But while Kristin was away in treatment, Mark made a drastic decision that turned an already painful situation into a full-blown media war. Believing that 12-year-old Sam was living in an unsafe home, Mark and his wife, actress Pam Dauber, went to court to file for full legal custody of the boy. They argued that Kristin was completely unfit to raise a child due to her long history of substance abuse and emotional instability. When Kristin finished her rehab program and found out her own brother was trying to take her youngest son away, she went crazy with anger. She vowed to fight back with everything she had, and this led straight into a brutal custody battle in the summer of 1987. The trial became a deeply painful spectacle inside the Los Angeles County Superior Court. A child psychiatrist took the stand and delivered heartbreaking testimony about young Sam. The doctor revealed that during therapy sessions, Sam had drawn a picture depicting his mother as a terrifying dragon, explaining that he never knew which version of her would walk through the door because of her wild mood swings. Kristin's legal team immediately fought back and aimed right at Mark and Pam. They threatened to subpoena Pam's former Mork and Mindy co-star, Robin Williams, to testify under oath about substance use on the set of their TV show years earlier. Realizing that the trial was tearing the family apart in front of national tabloids, Mark decided he could not go through with the public bloodshed. So in August 1987, he dropped the custody petition. The judge awarded Kristin custody of Sam while granting Mark visitation rights and ordering the whole family to enter mandatory therapy. Santa Fe and what her children built. After the brutal court battle with her brother came to an end, Kristin realized that staying in Los Angeles would only keep her trapped in the same toxic cycle. So she packed up her life and moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico, in search of a quiet place where her past wouldn't follow her. In Santa Fe, she fell back to painting as a way to work through the trauma of her early life. She created simple, colorful folk art that reflected her memories, and her paintings quickly caught the attention of art collectors, including former First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. By 1999, Kristin turned her artwork and personal journals into a published book, finally getting the chance to tell her own story in her own words. She stayed away from the media and lived out the rest of her days in peace until she died of a heart attack in 2018 at 72 years old. While Kristin was building a peaceful life in the desert, her 4 children had to figure out how to navigate their own futures in the shadow of their family's fame and trauma. The oldest daughter, Tracy, chose to pursue acting and quickly proved her worth. Even when she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma in her 20s, she kept working straight through her cancer treatments and landed major roles on classic TV shows like Square Pegs and Father Dowling Mysteries. Watching their sister push forward inspired the twin boys, Gunnar and Matthew, to take their own leap into the spotlight. They picked up guitars and formed the rock band Nelson, which eventually scored a #1 hit song in 1990. That achievement officially made the Nelsons the first family in American history to land #1 records across 3 straight generations. Even the youngest son, Sam, forged his own part and went to school to get a degree in psychology. After that, he went into the music industry too, but as a record executive. In the end, every single one of Ricky and Kristin's children found a way to survive the fallout of their parents' disastrous marriage. They managed to take the pain of their childhoods and turned it into lasting success. Looking back at her life, was Kristin's tragic end bound to happen from the moment she married into fame at 17? Or could things have turned out differently if she had left Los Angeles sooner? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please click on the next one on your screen.